friends, welcome to today's YouTube Live. Just getting my camera all set up here. Make sure everything's in the shot and everything is sounding good. If you don't mind, would you guys let me know in the chat if everything sounds okay? I think my last YouTube had a little bit of a kind of a distorted sound. So let me know if you're picking up on that or if it sounds okay. Okay, so today we are going to draw some fall leaves, paint some fall leaves. The other day I was working on some stuff and I asked my husband to go on a walk with our son and collect a few fall colored leaves, and they brought me a few different fun options to work with. So I have a few photos I'm kind of referencing here. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to do 3 leaves here. And I'm going to get started by, I'm going to draw up one leaf and then do a layer of paint. And then I'll draw another leaf, do a layer of paint, because I'm going to be doing some wet on wet techniques where I kind of let the water disperse some of the color. So I'm going to be having to wait for layers to dry. So we're going to go ahead and get started here at the top with a maple leaf. And I'm also kind of distracted. I just painted my nails. And then I tried to use a towel to clean my palette off, and then I destroyed my paint on my nails. Okay, so I'm going to do a maple leaf here. So I'll go ahead and start with just getting the stem placed here. And I'm going to do like 5 anchors here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 points to this maple leaf here. In between these two, I'm going to actually do one more little tiny anchor there. And this one has kind of a lot of detail, but if you kind of break it down into like the 5 main points, it becomes a little bit easier. So the top here, let's go ahead and get this nice pointy tip, and then we kind of go up and just sort of do these little kind of scalloped tips like that. And then we'll go down, do the little scalloped edge again till we get to that point. Over here we'll do another deep kind of U shape, and then do a few of these little scallops to connect to that point. Over here I got another big point, and we'll do the same thing here. Scallop, and then a big deep U shape to that point. And then we just have the last dots here at the bottom. So we'll do a big kind of U shape, a big deep hook U shape there. And then let's connect both of these to right here, but give it a little bit of a wave shape, okay? Okay, I'm trying to decide if there's anything I want to tweak about mine. I think it feels pretty good. I think I could probably take it in just a little bit deeper. Not that this really matters that much, but this is kind of the star of the show, so I want to make sure I like the shape of this leaf here. Okay, so now let's just draw out a few more things here. So let's just lightly kind of map in the center vein, and then we'll do the vein right here so it kind of meets like a giant V, and then do another one from the same point all up into this corner. And then all the other smaller veins are going to radiate from these 3. So we have one reaching out into this point, one reaching out into that one. And then I think we can kind of fill the other ones in when we're actually painting it. Another little thing I'm going to tweak here is the very tip of a few of these. I think We could kind of extend it out just a little bit like that. I think that feels good. Okay, so now I'm going to do some painting right away. I'm going to use a slightly larger brush here, a round brush. This one is a size 12. You don't have to use one that large. Use whatever size you have. Just make sure it's a little bit on the larger side. And then what I'll do is just go ahead and fill in the entire leaf with water. Hi, Cheyenne from Imperial Beach, California. It sounds like a good place to be. I would love to know where you guys are watching from. It's always really interesting to find out. I am, if you don't know, I am in sunny New Mexico. It's a beautiful, crisp, warm fall day over here. The little village I live in is doing a fall festival today, so some of my friends are texting me like, where are you? I was like, oh, I'm teaching a class today. So maybe we'll go over in the afternoon. I do love fall. There's always so many activities, right? Emily in Dallas, Texas. Hello. Good to have you. I love Texas. We were out in Waco earlier this year, and I love Texas. I love that area. All right, so I have this leaf all wet here. So I'm going to do a few different colors here. My main color is going to be yellow. So use whatever yellow you want to use. I would recommend a crisp, cool, like lemon yellow or a Reolin yellow. And then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start dropping in this yellow. Becky is in State College, Pennsylvania. Hi, Becky. Good to have you. I don't know if I've ever spent time in Pennsylvania before, but I feel like all the photos I see, it looks so beautiful and like a lot of farmland. Does that sound right? Emily says, I went to Baylor, and you love Texas, but it gets so hot. Yeah, it does. Oh my goodness. We were visiting some friends in Lockhart, Texas, a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. I was pregnant with Raphael, very pregnant with him, and so we were there in April, and I just thought it would feel like spring, and it was unbelievably hot. I think it was like in the 90s, and I just was not ready for that kind of heat. Like usually you kind of work up to that kind of heat, but when you just go from cool spring here in New Mexico to like 90 degrees, it was a shock. Okay, so the next thing I'll do here is I dropped in a bunch of yellow, and then I'm going to actually grab some red. So I'll just get some cadmium red here. Okay, and then I'm gonna just drop it in right here in a couple spots, kind of lighten that. It's a little bit heavy, a little bit too much red, so I'll just blot it here on this towel. And I'm not gonna cover it, I'm just kind of doing these little drops while it's still wet and just letting that water take it and disperse it for me. And so since I'm putting red on top of yellow, it's gonna sort of turn into just like a nice orange color. You could even kind of push it more towards a pink if you want to. You don't have to do cadmium red. Windsor red, alizarin crimson, you could do any type of red here. Okay, I am going to grab some green. I'm just gonna grab some sap green, and while it's wet, just drop it in over here on this left side. Catching up on the chat here real quick. We have Irene in Chicago, Manchester, Washington. Ooh, love Seattle. Across the sound from Seattle. I love Seattle. I have my closest cousins live out in Seattle, so we grew up going out there a ton. I always love visiting there. And I love Chicago too, by the way, Irene. That's a fun city. All right, so this is kind of fun. I like that we kind of have, that's what I love about fall leaves is you're not just seeing one color. You're usually seeing a lot, and there's a lot of life happening in an autumn leaf. So this will be, like I said, this will be kind of the star of the show. And we're gonna do a couple more simple leaves here at the bottom. Real quick, I'm just gonna drop in a couple moments of like strong paint pigment. So I'm just kind of reaching straight into this paint right here and just dropping it here. So I want these kind of like little globby dark parts that are green. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. Clean my brush off. Grab a pencil. And I'm going to do a leaf right here at the bottom. So let me think what shape I would like to do. I will do, let's do, how about right here? This will be a very simple, kind of like an ash leaf. I think it's an ash leaf. So it's just a very classic football shape here. You can give it a tiny bit of wave if you want to, just to give it a little bit of interest. With a tiny little stem there. Very simple. I'm going to switch to a slightly smaller brush. I'll go to a size 6. Also, recently I had posted on my Instagram asking people what their favorite brush recommendations were, because I was like, okay, I am using these brushes so much. I need some fresh ones. And I wanted to hear people's recommendations. And so many people recommended the Princeton Heritage, which I had maybe tried once or twice like years ago. I never really gave it much thought, but I bought a couple of those and I've been really enjoying them. Hopefully they'll last. I feel like synthetic brushes typically just don't last that long, but fingers crossed. The sable brushes are great, but they're definitely a little bit more of an investment, which I recommend, but if somebody's just getting started, I don't necessarily recommend buying a super expensive brush. I think it's good to wait and make sure that you really love watercolor, that you want to invest. I think it's good to kind of start simply and then get more complex as you go. So let me start by just painting some water in this leaf here. Hello, Betsy in Louisville, Kentucky. Love Louisville. There's a really great ice cream shop there that we used to go to when we were driving up when I lived in Nashville. I think it was Grater's. Does that sound right? Grater's ice cream there in Louisville. Such a good ice cream brand shop. Irene says her daughter's following along. Hi, Margot. Good to have you here. Aww. Her 4-year-old daughter is following along, and that's amazing. It's hard to imagine my son's 3. It's hard to imagine him following along with the tutorial, so that's impressive. We got some time though. Okay, so I painted that wet just with water, and I think I'm going to use a mix of colors here. So let's do a mix of brown, yellow, and a red color. So I'm going to mix, instead of mixing them on the palette, I think I'm actually going to just mix them on the water, right on the paper. In the water, on the paper. So just drop in some brown, and then let's see what happens if we drop in some yellow. And then let's drop in some red. I'll use the same red I was using. Actually, no, I'm going to use pink. Alizarin crimson. Yeah, that's the color I want, because I want this to be more of a burgundy. I don't want it to be an orange leaf. I want it to be burgundy. So I'm just going to drop it kind of right on top of what I already placed down. So brown, yellow, pink. And don't be afraid of letting it just kind of mix. Don't be afraid of letting some spots be more pink, some spots being more brown, some more yellow. Another thing that I'm going to do here is just drop some yellow right on top of it. Create those beautiful little blooms. I love it. Okay, I'm going to just grab a little bit of pink and brown and just paint this little stem right here. Go around the edge here, just make sure I cover up my pencil markings. I'm using a really dark pencil today. I'm a little bit heavy-handed. I like to make sure that whenever I'm doing tutorials that I'm using a pencil that's dark enough that everybody could see what my sketch is. I don't typically recommend using a dark pencil when you do a sketch. I like to use an F pencil, typically. Okay. Alrighty, cleaning that off, and then I'm going to do one more leaf over here. So this is one of the ones that my son collected for me. I don't actually know what it was from what kind of plant. Could have been a weed, but it was yellow. So it just kind of had these small leaf shapes coming off of a stem. So go ahead and just draw these little oval shapes. Some of them are really thin, like that. And some of them are a little bit more thick. And what we're going to try and do is just sort of make it feel irregular. We don't want it to feel too perfect. So we want some of the leaves to kind of be reaching upward, some of them to be reaching downward, some of them to be more true ovals, and some of them to be more like flat looking because of the perspective. And they're all kind of growing out of different parts of the stem. They're not just exactly right next to each other on the right and left, if that makes sense. Actually, look at my other reference photo real quick. And we'll do one. How about one that's growing right over the stem? I'll erase that stem from underneath it. Okay, so this little plant here was pretty much just a true yellow with the tiniest hints of green here and there. So I'll just grab my yellow color, my cool yellow, and I'm going to, instead of doing the wet on wet, I will just do what we call wet on dry application and just put it right onto the dry paper. All right. There we go, easy enough. And as that's still wet, I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of green. Using just this tiny little tip here, tiny tip of my brush, I'm going to drop just a tiny bit in a few of these tips of these leaves. Mainly just right there, the very tip. I'm not going to do it on all of them. Just in, well, most of them, but just on the tips. I want them to mainly feel yellow. So if it feels like it's too much green and it's starting to spread through the whole leaf, just use a towel and blot it really gently. Okay, feeling good. So my top flower is starting to dry here. So I will come back and start adding some details there, but let me take a quick coffee break. So for this leaf here, let me go back to my other reference photo here. for this other leaf, what I'm going to start doing is I want to start adding some really, really dark brown, kind of like the leaf is starting to turn into like crusty brown tips. So in some of these edges, I'm going to start dropping in this brown color. And I could have done it earlier, but this brown, I didn't really want it to spread because this is, it's like a very controlled part of the flower or the leaf, if that makes sense. Like it's just very precise. It doesn't look this bloomy, bleedy, kind of flowy color. It's very precise, at least in what I'm seeing here. So carefully here, you want to make sure that you might have to turn your paper so that your palm doesn't get into the paint that you just painted here down below. I'm just going to kind of hover. But what I'll do here is I'm just going to drop in some brown at the very tips. Kind of work my way around. And I want it to feel, let me think how I can explain this. Kind of spotted. Like I said, it's very precise, but I want it to feel like there's parts where we can still see green above the brown. So it kind of almost has like a speckled look to it. See what I'm saying? Some of the tips are still green and some are brown. I think that teaching is such a great way. If any of you are a little bit more experienced painters, I really highly recommend teaching because it helps you to really know your own, it helps you kind of know your stuff and really think about it critically. I think a lot of these techniques that I do are very intuitive because I've been painting for so many years. And it's really helpful to just try and explain it to somebody and think about what I'm actually doing. I've been giving a lot of thought to teaching recently just because I'm about to launch my new membership on Monday. And just kind of thinking about the value of teaching what you know and sharing that with the world and just kind of what it actually gives back to you, to me, myself. It has the realization of like, oh, actually, this helps me to like become a better artist because I have to think really hard about what I'm actually doing and try to explain it in a way that's simple and not too scientific, not too complex. So I'm going to drop a few more of these little brown speckles, kind of starting to reach downward into the leaf just a little bit. I'm actually also going to make the tip of this leaf, I want to make it go up and out just a tiny bit more here. Martha asked me if I mixed my own brown. I did not. This is called burnt umber. Great question. It is possible to mix your own browns, for the record, folks. Very easy. All you do is basically mix two opposite colors. So yellow and purple, blue and red. If you mix those two together, you're going to be able to create like a nice neutral kind of brown color. I love to just be able to grab a brown quickly though, so I generally like to keep burnt umber on my palette. I didn't keep brown on my palette for many years though, because I don't know, somebody must have said something that made me feel like like I wasn't a real artist if I had mixed colors on my palette. Like brown is a mixed color, but I don't think that way anymore. I love mixed colors. Okay, so I think this top part's feeling really nice. I'm gonna do a few more little speckles here and there. And then let's go over to this one here. I'm gonna keep it just a little bit more minimal on this side. I'm not seeing quite as much brown, but I am seeing a lot of little speckles. The speckles in this are going to be what gives this leaf its character, I think. And actually, as I'm doing that, I'm actually going to hold back just a little bit. I'm actually going to not try and bring too many speckles into it yet because there's more I want to do with green. And so I'm going to wait to do that. But I'm just going to focus on the tips for right now. And then over here on this side, let's see here. Go ahead and drop a bunch over here on this leaf edge. The top is where I'm seeing it the most. Martha asks, what's the biggest difference between your umber and burnt sienna? So burnt umber is more of a true brown. So and burnt sienna, which I actually do not have on this palette. There's seasons where I use burnt sienna a bunch. I haven't been using it recently. There's something about burnt sienna I've realized that I don't like how long it takes for the color to start moving. There are some paints that the more you paint with, the more you realize like how quickly you can get the color to activate and move, if that makes sense. Burnt sienna, even like the professional grade, the high quality stuff, maybe it's just the Winsor Newton that I use. I could try a different brand. But I find that it takes a while to like get going. I have to like rub it, and then even still it's like very low value, like kind of diluted still. So it just takes me forever. So I like to use brown. If I want a burnt sienna, I'll just take a little bit of red and brown, mix them together, and it's a perfect burnt sienna color. This here is kind of a burnt sienna look, isn't it? So we did yellow, brown, a little bit of pink. Perfect. Okay, so Martha, we call those ones earth shades or earth tones. I've heard people call them both. So I believe that, okay, I could be wrong here, but I think what I understand about them is those pigments are, well, I believe that they're all like found in the earth in some sort of like mineral or rocks. Like they're all like found in the earth, like the burnt umber, burnt sienna, all of that. So I think they're like pure colors. Whereas some paint colors, like, let me think of a good example. Like Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is like a mix of several pure colors that are mixed together and kind of packaged that way. So it's kind of fun to have a mix of, pure colors and mixed colors. Okay, so let's move to some greens. So I want to go back to my sap green here. I'm using my size 6 brush. I'm going to actually switch to a smaller brush. And this is a fun part here. So we're going to start adding in these veins. So I'm going to just follow that pencil marking that I did earlier. And over here as well. Also, I don't know if you know this, but I learned recently that it's easier to do a horizontal line really straight than it is to do like a vertical line straight. I don't know if any of you guys have found that to be true, but I have tested it out recently and I was like, oh yeah, it's like way more steady if I'm a little bit more horizontal. So I'm going to turn my sketchbook to the side a bit. This week I've been working on a few murals at a local pizza shop here in Corrales called Village Pizza. A place I've been going to since I was a little kid, so for like 30 years. The shop is from the 80s. But anyways, I got hired to do some painting, like murals there, which I don't typically do. I used to do it a lot in Nashville back in the day, but I love Village Pizza, so I was like, okay, I'll do it. But oh my goodness. It was hard. It was really hard because when you're working on I'm used to working on like my little paintings, a very controlled atmosphere. But oh my gosh, doing these like huge murals. I had to have like projectors, and it's very physically exhausting, like you know, up and down ladders, and you know, craning your neck at weird angles, and it was very challenging work. At least I thought so. But it was fun. I'll have to share some photos over on Instagram. I shared one photo of like the horse. I think it might be saved to my stories, but okay, so let me talk through what I'm doing here. I am going to just drop in some sections of darker green. And what I'm trying to think about is kind of keeping some light lines in between them. Over here, I'm just going to do some green lines. I'll do the same thing over here. Just kind of these blocks, sort of think these like rectangular block shapes. And I'm just trying to think about keeping a few light lines in between them. I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to like cover this whole area. I think that less is more. We can just do a few little moments like that, and it's going to create a great effect. I'm going to drop in a little bit more green over here. Let's say we have this line here. Over here, I'll drop a little bit more green along this bottom edge. And what I'm seeing is just that as this leaf is starting to turn, we're just seeing like little explosions of green, little explosions of red, little brown parts. So there's kind of a lot of variety. Dropping in some extra dark green in a few places here. And let's come over to this center area just above it. I'll do a couple of these same sort of shapes, so sort of these long rectangular kind of block shapes. And thinking about keeping these lighter green lines in between them. I'll drop in. So my brush right now is small, and it's also, as I'm painting, it's starting to lose paint and lose water. So what I have right now is called, they call this technique dry brush. And we're able to get some really cool effects with that dry brush. So if I lean this brush sideways and just sort of rub it on the paper, what happens is the paper kind of catches, or I would say the paintbrush catches on the tiny little nooks and crannies and surface, the textured surface of this paper, and it creates these cool little textured, distressed almost looking spots, which is perfect for this leaf. So if you can kind of think about getting your brush so that it's, another way you can do it is just sort of blot it here and try and get to that place where there's not a lot of water, and you can drag that paint across the surface just a little bit to help give us that beautiful texture. I think that's the name of the game with this leaf, is texture. There's so much texture in it. Over here, I'm going to go on the right side of our very center. I'm going to grab some green, and I'm going to try and create that texture here with this darker green color. In a few places, I want you to also paint some long lines. Add some texture. In a few places, you might also want to drop some water. I kind of want to create a mixture of some spots feel really watery and smooth, and then some parts feel really textured. Over here, I'm going to paint in a few of those green veins. I would love to know how your guys' leaves are turning out. Let me know in the chat how you feel like yours are turning out. Is this harder or easier than you expected? Okay. A few more down here at the bottom. Over here, I think I want more of our little texture markings. So I'm just grabbing some green. One way you can kind of do it is using a really damp tip. Just sort of rub that damp tip on the dry part of your paint. You can blot it a tiny bit. And I think that's a really great way to kind of get that dry brush technique quickly. So be able to create that textured effect. I'll do it a few more places here in the center. All right, I'm enjoying this. This is like a classic leaf, isn't it? I love the look of maple leaves. So I think I want to actually start dropping a little bit of yellow in it as well. I think a lot of my yellow underneath there is dried really light. So I'm just going to drop in a tiny bit more yellow in a few places. Love this variety. The variety of the greens, the reds, the browns, the yellows. I think I'm going to grab a little bit more of this cadmium red. And I'll do the same, maybe a little bit of the same technique that I did earlier with the greens, is just try and create kind of a dry brush technique here. So I'm mostly seeing it here in this area. See a little bit of the red down here as well. It's not everywhere though. Maybe a tiny bit over here in this left area. I don't see any over there. Okay, and let's go ahead and paint our stem in because we haven't thought about that yet. I'm going to do I'll go ahead and do the red that we were using. I'll mix it here with some brown. Red and brown is going to get us a nice, like we were saying earlier, the red and brown is going to get you kind of that burnt sienna color. And then I'm going to paint that stem this beautiful reddish brown color. Irene says the dry brush technique is a little challenging. It is challenging, isn't it? It's kind of hard to get to that right consistency quickly. I find that if your brush is too large, it's going to be holding too much water, so you have to use a really, really small brush. I think that's probably the biggest key. But yeah, blot it as much as you can and try and just grab, using your damp brush, try and just grab paint from the driest part of your paint. Just sort of activate it with the smallest amount of water, because that is the trick for the dry brush, is that you use just a tiny bit of water. And then you also have to be painting on a surface that is also dry, or it won't work. So basically, if there's any water, it's going to ruin it. Or if there's too much water, it's going to ruin it. Okay, I'm going to grab a tiny bit more brown. In a few places here, I'm going to start adding these little speckles, hopefully in spots that are dry. Here, I'm going to do it like I'm not doing the dry brush technique here because I want to have a little bit more control. I'm not seeing like a ton of brown, and it's also such an intense dark value. I don't want to overdo it and just make it a brown, mess. So I'm trying to really control how much paint is being laid down here. So I'm just using the very tip. Okay, so keep working on that as much as you need to. If you need to pause it and take a minute, that's totally fine. I am going to move over to this little red leaf down here. And this will be a fairly, I think this will be a fairly fast process with this leaf. It already looks awesome. We're just gonna add a little bit more detail. So I'm gonna grab some of the pink that we were painting with earlier and a little bit of brown. Pink and brown. And let's just keep this simple here. So we'll paint a simple thin vein, the length of this leaf. And then let's paint these really thin lines that are really close together. So these really thin veins. All right. Same thing over here on the top side. And then I am going to just articulate that center vein just a bit more. Always want the center vein to be just a little bit thicker than the lines that are, the veins that are coming off of that center vein. I'm going to add a bit of a dark edge right here. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of a darker color to the very tip there. Kind of helps to give a little bit of movement to the leaf, doesn't it? I think I will also drop in just a little bit. So I'm kind of turning my brush on this side. I'm just dropping in a little bit of that dark color here on the top side of this stem, or the vein, sorry. Right along that vein, just dropping in this exact same color. And I think that's helping to create the impression that the leaf is just folding a little bit. It doesn't feel as flat. So it looks like there's a true crease in that leaf whenever we add just that little bit of darker pink color, pinkish brown color. Just like that. While I have this darker color on my brush, I'm going to just add a tiny bit more to this vein, to this stem of our maple leaf. Needs a little bit more depth, I think. Okay, and then let's come back to our last leaf here. So I'm just going to use pure brown here. Using pure brown, and actually I'm going to go back to my other reference photo here. So I will go ahead and just, it's very simple here actually. All we got to do is just add these kind of little like nodule shapes at the base of each of the leaves. And then it just has this thin brown stem. And maybe in a couple spots we could add these little knots in this branch for some leaves that fell off. Just like that. Last thing I'll do, I'm going to grab some yellow, tiny bit of brown, get a nice earthy color here, and add just the center vein in these tiny little leaves, the leaves that are more so like facing directly. The ones that are on their sides, you don't have to worry about that. just to give it a little bit more variegation. I'm going to drop a tiny bit of that earthy brown color on a few places in these leaves as well. It looks a little bit one-dimensional to me to just see the one shade of yellow. I think we need a little bit more depth. So I'm just playing with a darker, more earthy colored yellow here. So just a little bit of brown, a little bit of yellow. You could also just use yellow ochre if you have that. Yellow ochre would be a perfect color. Okay. Let me think about this for a minute. Think if there's anything else I want to add to my leaf, my top leaf here. I actually really like how it's turned out. I don't think it's necessary to overwork this one. It's kind of one of those those leaves that it's just, I think it's easy to get a cool effect without doing every single thing that you're seeing. But I'll add just a couple little veins here on the top. Here and here. Okay, I think I like how this one's turning out. So I'll give this probably 10 minutes and then erase whatever I can. I think that most of it is covered pretty well with paint, except for this little one here. Yeah, I'll give it a second. But I would also love to hear if any of you guys have, I mean, you're all here, so I'm assuming this is probably a good time for you guys as far as lives go. I'm trying to think through how often and when I want to be doing live classes. I think the last several months I've been doing 1 or 2 a month, usually on Tuesdays. But I think Saturdays is generally, I think that's a better day for a lot of people. So if you like Saturdays, let me know. And if there's a different time, I'm also open to that. I think I might start trying to mix it up because I do have some people in different parts of the world who would like to join these classes live. And so I might do one in the evening soon. But yes, let me know if you guys think Saturday is a good time. And yeah, I think that there's a better turnout on the weekends than for Tuesday classes. So Martha says, I'm from New England and this time, oh my goodness, I know your leaves over there are so gorgeous. My husband's from Connecticut and he's always talking about how beautiful the leaves are there. Here in New Mexico, we basically just get yellow leaves. We don't have a ton of red. I mean, a few plants will turn red, but as far as our main trees, we have elms and cottonwoods here. That's the main 2 types of trees. And they both go yellow. Actually, elms just kind of turn brown. They don't even really do much. Irene says she just dipped her brush into her coffee. Very nice. Done that. Better than taking a drink from your paint water though, right? But yes. Okay. Well, this is feeling like a good place for me to stop. I really enjoy doing these live classes with you. You're also all invited to join me on Monday. I'll be sharing the link to finally join my new membership, which maybe to you guys it seems like it's all kind of new. I think I just announced it a couple weeks ago, but I feel like this has been consuming my thoughts for like 2 months. So I'm really glad to finally have it almost ready. I'm kind of at that point in the process where I'm starting to like really overthink all of the details and how much more effort I should be putting into this. But the good news is it's pretty much ready. So anyways, I'll be back on Monday. If you guys are not on my email list, make sure that you are at shailenelouise.com/subscribe. And this is great timing because my husband just showed up with the kids. So love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I would love to see what you created. So please send those photos over. Tag me on Instagram, whatever. Love you guys. I'll talk to you soon, okay? Bye.